Step Therapy 911 presents Stephanie Samuels. Straight Talk. Join us every Sunday, 7 p.m. live Eastern Standard Time on Facebook Live. It's real, raw, and uncensored. And now, here's your host, Stephanie Samuels. Stop the stigma.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Straight Talk with Stephanie Samuels. I'm a psychotherapist who works pretty much exclusively with law enforcement officers as well as other first responders. Been in practice for over 30 years at this point. I started this video podcast actually as a request from my officers that I see in private practice, that they felt it was somewhat unfair that the only people that would really benefit from being able to have a relatively foul-mouthed conservative cop shrink was in New Jersey, and they really felt that it was important for me to be able to speak to a much larger population so that they can see what a real shrink actually looks and sounds like, since I'm not quite the stereotypical, though after 50, the glasses were needed to be able to read. So I guess that kind of makes me more of looking like the shrink. And that's why I decided to do Straight Talk, was to try and help them out. And after tonight, I'm going to be shifting it over to Step Therapy 911, so there's not a whole lot of confusion going on, but that was going to be important. So tonight's probably, I've been doing this show for a little while, and truly one of my greatest honors is tonight, is being able to sit virtually with a man that I know we've discussed heroes, that I consider to be a hero, and he will tell me unequivocally that he's just a ordinary man that had an idea and was able to execute it. But to so many people, he is the face behind an organization that everybody knows, but truthfully, nobody knows the story of. So today, I am honored to have Frank Shankwitz join me, who is the co-founder of Make-A-Wish Foundation. There is going to be no topic that is going to be off limits. Is one of the things that when I spoke to Frank, I had asked him, what I could cover and what I couldn't, and he made it really clear to me that everything was fair game, and it is with that openness and honesty that we can impact a world, as this man has. But being able to do that on a very different level with law enforcement is also going to be imperative. His introduction and his list of accomplishments would truly take at least the hour to go over. So I'm going to highlight what I can. And anything, Frank, that of course you want to add, absolutely. Frank began his career as an Arizona Highway Patrol motorcycle officer and ended it 42 years later as a homicide detective with the Arizona Department of Public Safety. While serving as a motorcycle officer, he was asked to make a dying young boy's last wish come true. And the little boy's name was Chris, who would end up changing a whole lot of other lives. Matter of fact, I believe it was in this past month or so, Frank, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that over 500,000 wishes have now been granted.
Correct.
So this single event would change the course of the life of millions of others. So my guest, Frank Shankwitz, the Wish Man, along with his wife, Kitty, and others, created and co-founded the Make-A-Wish Foundation in 1980. Frank is who's the first president and CEO of that organization. He has received truly countless awards, honorary degrees, and sits on 8 other not-for-profit boards. 2 of them we're going to talk about today. Again, I strongly encourage listeners to watch Wish Man on Netflix and get an autographed copy of Frank's book on his website, wishman1.com. So I have to tell you that the book is truly amazing. It is just, it's written as you are. It is humble. It is to the point, not full of shit. And I think would be able to do, it's so much good. And you and I are gonna touch on that. Today's show is truly about overcoming adversity, paying forward, and so much more, because that's what Straight Talk's about. So it's an honor to be here. And I really, I want to open up, the conversation to all of our listeners. But I wanted to read kind of in your introduction. It was kind of ruminated with me, and I wanted to share it. Every child has a dream. They want to grow up to be a cowboy, a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, or a firefighter. Some want to be nurses, singers, artists, and mommies or daddies. Every birthday marks an opportunity for a new dream or wish. Some wish for ponies, baby dolls, or bikes. Others wish for simplest things like food or clothing. Still others wish for something so profound and life-changing that even adults cannot contemplate being in their shoes. As a young boy, my greatest wish was for survival. My childhood was much different than many boys, but similar to some. I dreamed of food and shelter, better days and easier times when I didn't have to wonder where my next meal was coming from or labor for it. It was my childhood struggles that led me to dream of a stable, secure future for me and my family. So one of the things that I, in being a therapist and kind of really homing in on dealing with law enforcement, is I realized what the profile of a cop was. There are exceptions to the rule, but I'll tell you, it makes for a damn good cop. It is somebody that has grown up in crisis, does well in crisis, doesn't know how to live without crisis. Somebody who has issues with a father figure or significant loss early in life. Somebody who has a history of abuse, emotional, physical, sexual, or neglect. Makes for an incredible cop, makes for a very, very difficult home life. So I want to kind of throw that onto you. When you hear that profile, you look at your life and you realize what resiliency is really established from, because resiliency doesn't happen as an adult typically. To be resilient, you have to go through a lot of shit. You don't get to be a pampered pet and then experience a horrible day and become resilient. And yet there are many people that don't. There are many people that end up dying by suicide, end up passively dying, the at-risk behaviors or what have you. And yet your fortitude, your whether it was love for life or just love for survival, played out throughout your childhood, played out in a near fatal motorcycle accident. And those kind of seem to be the threads of where you are. And one of the things before we came on tonight is you're just one of the most humble men. And you have never forgotten where you came from. You've never forgotten how important it is to give back. And these are just some of the stuff. I've thrown a lot at you, but I have a lot of people watching tonight whose lives you have impacted. And not just from the Make-A-Wish, but how you've lived your life and how you wore that badge with honor. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna open up the floor, starting with that profile of a cop. What's it like? Have you heard that profile before?
I've heard that profile before, and I've also heard the profile that had to make a career choice between being a criminal or a cop. I was never on that criminal side, but and just going back, some of the things you covered, especially childhood, very traumatic childhood. My mother divorced my father when I was 2 years old. Where she went, we never knew. ages 2 to 6, very happy years with my dad, my grandparents, my aunt, uncles, cousins, family outings. And I was born in Chicago, so I'm a city kid at this point. At 6 years old, I'm on a kindergarten playground. A lady comes up and grabs me. She says, "I'm your mother, you're going with me." I had no idea who she was. And my father had custody, so she kidnapped me and said, "We're going to Arizona." But she took a strange route. Now, I had no idea where Arizona was. In kindergarten, we hadn't quite got the geography yet. But she took a strange route and ended up in northern Michigan. And she pulled into a campground, which I had never seen before. And she said, "This is home." And the home was a tent. And that was our home. And all of a sudden, I'm the city kid, all of a sudden living on the shores of Lake Michigan and had no idea what to do. And she was gone all day. She was gone most of the nights. And I was just left on my own, learning survival skills. But that was the biggest thing as I started learning, because I figured out, and food was always an issue. In fact, she left just enough peanut butter and jelly for one sandwich for lunch. Hopefully she'd come home to make some dinner on a little cook stove and so on. But I actually started enjoying those survival skills. I started exploring. This is a whole new world to me. Taught myself how to swim by watching other people. And for the next several years, up until age 10, it was living in a tent, it was living in a car, living in old flop houses. Like in Michigan, when winter comes, we got to find some place, some nasty places. And again, food was always an issue. At age 10, my father found us. I went to get the local authorities to have her arrested. When he went into town, she had everything we've had, threw it in an old station wagon. And so we're going to Arizona, and off we went. And it took about 6 weeks to make that trip because of not enough money. She'd stop at a little town, get a job as a waitress, get enough tip money to get some gas, get a little bit of food, again, sleeping in the car, cleaning up at gas stations. And finally arrived at a little town called Seligman, Arizona, up on Route 66, then population 500. And just outside of town, her car broke down. And it's the first time I'd ever seen my mother cry. She said, "We're out of gas. I have no money. We have no food. I don't know what I'm going to do." A rancher stopped, asked what the problem was. She told him. He said, "I'll go get some gas and you follow me to the ranch house. You can stay with us until you can get settled." This is the first time I've seen somebody wanting to help. And now this is in the 1950s, late 40s, 1950s. There's no such thing as food stamps and welfare and so on. If you wanted to eat, you worked. Simple as that. But at 10 years old, this is the first time we're in a town. And in fact, we're sleeping on the kitchen floor. That's our bedroom, but it's shelter. Biscuits and gravy every morning from the rancher's wife. I still love it today. My favorite. But all of a sudden, we're having some meals. And she got a job as a hotel maid. I'm 10 years old. I got a full-time job as a dishwasher. And during this period, I did not have this father figure like you mentioned. He was always trying to find us. Now, we have no idea where we're at right now. And I watched a gentleman across the street from this restaurant on Route 66 building something. Mexican gentleman. "Hi, what are you doing?" He said, "What's your name?" I said, "Frank." He said, "From now on, it's Pancho." And he said, "Grab a hammer, kid." Now, I had, again, no father figure, nobody to teach me any of these things. I said, "I don't know what to do." He said, "I'm going to teach you." And Juan became my father figure for the next several years. He taught me, the biggest thing he taught me was a work ethic, but he also taught me how to develop character and integrity. And those are developed, those aren't inherited at all. But it got me involved with, especially in school. It's the first time I'm in a school setting continuously. Got me involved with sports, got me involved with music. I had the teachers help me out because my math skills were so bad. They kept wanting to put me back. He was the guy that helped me out, having the teachers help me out. And that's where I just learned the whole thing about giving back, because one day he came to me and he said, "Frank, when you can, give back." Now, I'm about 11 years old. I said, "Juan, what do you mean give back? The poor people are helping us." And he said, "You don't have to have money to give back." Now, this is the 50s. This is a popular term today, give back, but this is the 50s. "What do you mean?" He said, "Look at the widow Sanchez. She's always trying to bring you some extra beans and tortillas to help you out, to give you some food. Look at her front yard. It's full of weeds. Look at her porch. It needs sanded and painted. You're big enough to do that. You don't have to have money to do that. You can give back because they're helping you." And it's just a lesson I learned in my whole life. Started 7th grade. My mother said, I can't afford you anymore, and left. Just left me on my own. I go to Juan. I say, I don't know what to do. And he said, this is where you have to learn to turn the negatives to the positive. Again, this is the 50s. You didn't hear that term. You hear that today all the time. What do you mean? My mother just left me. He said, I've arranged for you to live with the widow Sanchez. He said, you make $26 a week washing dishes. She's going to charge you $20 a week room and board. For the first time in your life, you're going to have $6 in your own pocket. Because everything I made, I had to give to my mother. He said, that's a positive. $6 is a lot of money back then, a week. He said, for the first time, you're going to have your own bedroom. Wow, that's a positive. She's the best cook in town. There was no argument about that. No worry about food anymore. And she had the first television set in Seligman, Arizona. The Mickey Mouse Club, wow, and that and everything. But again, I just appreciated everything that was happening. I continued that. I reconnected with my mother in high school. And she said, I need you to move here in Prescott, where I currently live. We're in the mountains of northern Arizona.
Did she reach out to you or you to her?
No, she reached out to me. She came to this little town of Seligman. She said, I need your help. I need you to get a full-time job. I can't afford to live by myself. Okay, Mom, I'll do that. And I did get a job right away. But the biggest thing was, and during grade school in Seligman, I practiced football. Juan got me on. They didn't have Pop Warner like they have now. I was on the high school team practicing only, learning the sport, because I really love that sport, along with basketball. And when I got to town of Prescott, I tried out right away for the football team. The coach says, I don't know where you learned all of this, but you're going to be first string on your freshman year. Thank you, coach. Then he came back a couple of weeks later. They want to put you back in 8th grade because your math skills are only at an 8th grade level. But I'm going to work with you all summer. See, here's people helping me out again. Work with me all summer, took the test again, got on the high school, got on the team. And again, my whole high school, people helping me out. And it's the old Army saying, be the best you can be. Whatever, my job, sports, whatever it was, I wanted to be the best I could be to pay back to those people.
How did you learn forgiveness? You know, I mean, I like I said, I had, read the book, certainly have no greater insight than anybody else that can read. But one of the things, in watching the movie, what certainly stuck out for me was I haven't been able to do it myself. That one of the things I struggle the most with, that I really want to, is to be able to forgive. And yet I read about your mom. Here is Juan. Here is another father figure. I believe that you did get in touch with your biological father. Am I correct that you're able to talk to him on Saturdays and stuff? And Juan certainly played a tremendous role. You had a father and you had a dad, if that makes sense. I felt like Juan was your dad, and your dad would have loved to have remained your dad, but with you having been taken, you really needed to find somebody who would teach you what dads teach you. And now here you go. Here's this woman who, from, again, my perspective, has had little use for you. You seem to be, I'm not sure she loved you or she hated your father more. And we always talk about that in child custody cases, is can you love your child more than you hate your ex? Because that's really the best interest of a child. And yet I feel like it was more out of spite that she took you than out of love for you. And was very capable of leaving you and doing what she felt she needed to do clearly for herself. As you had mentioned in your book about maternal instincts, and I would have to agree, I'm not quite sure where they played a role in her life. But it seemed like, once again, when she needed, somewhat narcissistic, she comes back to you to once again take care of her. How do you leave Juan? How do you deal with loss? How do you deal with forgiveness? And yes, your entire childhood and how you got to where you are today, as we are a sum total of all of our experiences. But I'm talking about back then. How the hell do you do it? Because you don't have that crystal ball that says, hey, I'm going to end up doing this amazing thing in the world. So I just have to tolerate all this crap and I'm going to be good. So how do you, 10 is an interesting age when you first got there because it's the first time that children understand through development. It's the concrete operations phase. It's knowing what death actually is, this permanency occurs at age 10. So that's kind of, in this transition. And then mom ends up leaving. You certainly can understand loss. And yes, you looked at it, it's amazing kind of who you got to live with and who then took care of you. But now she comes back to take you again. She can't kidnap you, but emotionally she kidnaps you. How?
Well, and I'm going to say myself fortunate because I was raised in the Mexican community. My formative years were living in the Mexican community, being raised. And also they say it takes a village to raise a child. Little town of Seligman, there's no way I could ever get in trouble. So it took that village. But the biggest thing in the Mexican community is how they honor their family, how they honor their seniors, their parents, and so on. And I was always taught that. And to answer your question, Juan always said, because Juan knew I had this thing with my mother, there was no love there whatsoever. But he said, she is your mother and you will respect her. Again, that's from that Mexican community type thing. And especially when he found out that she came and said, I need you to move to this other town. I need you to get a job to help take care of me. Again, he said, remember, she's your mother. You will respect her. And I followed that. And I witnessed that also. And again, my formative years within that Mexican community, how the family was so close.
How did you do with loss? How do you say goodbye to Juan and to the others that you were leaving? And again, you were a child. We didn't have the adult perspective. What was that like?
Well, it was, first of all, it was only 70 miles away from this other town. So I knew, which I've done all these years later, that I still stay in contact with the family. Juan has since passed away, but very close friends with the family, with the children and that. But it was an adventure, another adventure. That was the biggest thing. I had been to this town of Prescott, higher in the mountains, pine trees, beautiful little area, the like a Norman Rockwell painting downtown with the downtown courthouse plaza and that. And also they had a bigger football team. It wasn't the small football team. It was the actual 11-man football team. Sports were available. Better jobs was the biggest thing. I didn't have to be a dishwasher anymore. There was a variety of jobs that a kid could get, which I did right away. So again, it was an adventure.
You talked about the first time that you saw your mom cry was when you were going cross country and she had run out of, gas and had no money. When was the first time you can remember crying?
Oh, wow. When my father died.
When was that?
It was in 1981. And I had just seen him. In fact, when I was back to bury this little boy, Chris, who inspired me to start the Make-A-Wish Foundation, was the last time I saw my father. Now, we had remained in contact all the time. In fact, I had made several visits to see him, especially coming back from overseas following my Air Force enlistment. I spent a couple of weeks with him. So we had a very close relationship. But, and in the book, I described how I found out my father died. And I got home that night and my girlfriend, now my wife, Kitty, I'm trying to say it, and all of a sudden she said, let it out. And I was on the floor. I was literally on the floor, just crying.
It's still emotional for you.
Oh yeah, it is. It is.
And your mom died after him?
Yes, my mother lived till 90 years old. In fact, just about 10 years ago that she passed away. And as I kind of analyze her myself, I took psychology as a minor in college. So, but I kind of figured that she was bipolar, going this back and forth. And it was in later years that we did develop a relationship. It wasn't that super love relationship, but I tried to help her as much as I can in her later years. And in fact, she changed her whole personality. She got very involved with nonprofits. She was helping Veterans Administration. She was helping childhood crisis nursery, the crack babies that were being born. She was one of those that would just cuddle and hold them. Just changed her whole life around.
1981, you had been married to Mary. You had children of your own. By then, they were living in Ohio. Is that correct? Or they were still out in Arizona?
No, they were, well, 1981, let me get this. They were still with me in Arizona. I had got divorced in early 1981. I started this new relationship. I was a single dad for a while. I have daughters, in fact, were 9 and 11 at the time.
Did your dad meet them?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. From when they were little babies till that age right there. He came to Arizona a couple times. And he was the type of guy, his side of the family, his sister, the family, and now except my cousins, were the funny side of the family. They were always joking around, always smiling. And at the time you go to your house, it was always laughter. And they still today. I'm still in contact with my cousins.
Your dad got to see Make-A-Wish Foundation.
He got to see, yes. Well, I hadn't started then.
So
Because it didn't start until March of 1981.
Right, 1980.
Yeah, we had the idea, and we got it was official in 1980. We didn't grant our official wish until 1981, and it was just local in Arizona. It hadn't gone nationwide yet until 1983. It just exploded.
Do you feel his presence still today?
Oh, all the time. I've got some of memorabilia sitting around here. A card holder. He was an executive for then what's called Montgomery Wards, kind of like Sears, and a very successful man during that madman era. That unfortunately the drinking, that was the noon martini lunches and so on like that. But I've got a lot of his memorabilia, especially when he died and I went to Chicago going through his things. Every letter that I had sent him as a kid for my time overseas, he had all of those bundled up. It just made me feel so good.
Beautiful. I hadn't shared with you before you got on about how I ended up watching Wishman. And it was during COVID. I had gone to Oklahoma. My daughter had just gotten through basic and was going actually through OCS. She's in the Army. And she was now going to be in field artillery over at Fort Sill. So though she can be a second lieutenant, she can't figure out how to set up an apartment. So I had flown over there to Fort Sill and ended up, she's living off base, and ended up, helping her with that. Well, that same week, kind of Corona, hit, and nobody was going to fly. And my husband and I had to make a decision. He was in New Jersey. I was in Oklahoma. He had one daughter home. And the question was, do I stay here? What do we do? Because if I leave, I don't know whether or not I can come back and see her. And I don't know whether or not the military is going to continue. Like, so much was unknown. And so we decided to, divide and conquer. So I stayed in a little town called Elgin, Oklahoma. And we were figuring out how to do mother and daughter contact in relatively close quarters, where she was trying to figure out, how to become autonomous in as a second lieutenant in the Army, and I was figuring out how to be a cop shrink from what was now an incredibly small apartment. So while we were figuring that out, I had sent out on Copline, which is not for profit that I had started, that I have just a ton of listeners. So I put out on in the alumni group, and I said, hey, and actually on Copline itself, anybody have any movies, any series, anything? We're all going to be home. What is it that's kind of touched you? Well, several of my retirees had mentioned Wishman. I was like, what the hell is Wishman? So I'm not a big reader. So I decided to just watch it. I just saw it was about, Arizona pirate tribe. So I'm like, oh, good. All right. It's about it's a cop show. Well, let me tell you something. I had not anticipated. So at the end, the movie was done brilliantly. And at the end, I was like, why the hell doesn't the entire world know that a cop founded this organization. Because I have spent so long now listening to all the negatives about cops, and now even more so, as you're aware. So in my practice, I have so many officers struggling with so many different things. And one of them had just retired and was just frustrated, was angry, had been through a lot on the job. So I said to him, I said, you've trusted me for a lot of years, known him for 20 years. I said, I need for you to watch Wishman. He's a big movie guy. He's like, never heard of it. I'm like, I said, you cannot read anything. I'm going to give you what I want you to know about it. So if I go back in my text messages, you would laugh. So it started off with a text that says, are you fucking kidding me? I just took half a Xanax. Continues on with, are you fucking kidding me? It's getting worse. And going on with, somebody better get this dog. Continues. And at the end, he says, nothing prepared me for that. He was an officer who has really given to his own for so long and had been questioning what he can do in his own life. And when I spoke to him and he said, he goes, just so you know, I thought to myself, I can't believe that after 20 years and you helping me through some of the hardest days, that I was ending my relationship with you over a movie. He said, I thought to myself, there was no way that you were ever going to be redeemed. He said, and there we are at the end. They're all sitting around this table. And he's like, are you kidding me? And when you said, you know, that you had, to the founder of Make-A-Wish, that truly, the message is, you can look at the world and the same situation through different eyes. And what you do with that information in the world becomes so significant. And in listening to you, there are so many times where so many people would not look at their glass as being half full. And yet you did. Was there ever a time where you thought to yourself, I can't do it. I want to kill myself?
Well, not kill myself, as that's what you just said, but the time I can't do it, especially now, again, during my highway patrol years, motorcycle, I was on a 10-man tax squad, motorcycle tax squad, who worked the whole state of Arizona. 2 weeks to one town, 2 weeks to another. Long assignments, 14, 15 days, come home and get 3 or 4 days off and go out again, which is not good on marriage, by the way. In fact, the majority of our 10-man squad ended up being divorced, myself included. But I was also assigned to what they started a fatal accident team. Again, a 10-man team. We received some of the best training in the United States. In fact, we spent about 6 months in training all over the United States, including the FAA Accident Reconstruction School of Engineering at Arizona State University. And we investigated the most horrendous type accidents, the decapitations. The average highway patrolman can do this, but it's going to take him off the road 2 or 3 weeks. And working in 2-man teams, we could usually get this knocked out in about 7 days. And that's the reason developing this. But again, all we saw was the massive death that almost like a combat type situation, mangled bodies and that. And after a year or so of that, several of our guys said, Sarge, we need a break. We need to get out of this. We need to get somebody else in there. And it's a typical that goes on today. And it wasn't from our sergeant, it was from higher ups. If you can't handle it, you're fired. And then it wasn't called PTSD. Now we're talking the 80s. It was called still the old combat fatigue. It wasn't, PTSD wasn't around that name yet.
Right.
And in fact, one of our team members committed suicide, and he was a Vietnam vet and a war veteran. And he said, I've never seen on the battlefield what I'm seeing on this constantly. I mean, just week after week after week. And 2 others resigned. They wouldn't let them change positions. I myself went to my sergeant, great sergeant. In fact, we featured in the movie the character that Robert Pine played. And I said, I just can't do this anymore. And I had come off for about 6 months early, an undercover narcotics assignment. a temporary position that they put me in. And I had my false ID, an Arizona driver's license, a phony name, phony date of birth, everything else. And if everybody wanted to look it up, it was legitimate.
Yeah.
Typical undercover type thing. And he said, I'm going to check you into the psych ward down at the Samaritan Hospital. And we're going to check you in under your undercover name. And we're going to say that you're on vacation and not a state. And that's what saved me with that part. And by then I was crawling the walls. But the counseling, just the thing, get the ghost out of my head. Just love that whole thing. Get the ghost out of my head. Be able to talk to somebody. And that's why I learned through the years, you got all this built up, find somebody to talk to. Get those ghosts out of your head.
So were you diagnosed with, as you said, so we went from combat neurosis to combat fatigue to post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
Is that where you were pretty much diagnosed with what would today be known as PTSD?
Yes, exactly.
Any medications, anything that you found that helped you? Because I will tell you that your sleep is still abominable.
Yeah, no on the medications, because I'm one of those guys that I had never drugged any type of drugs, the marijuana, stuff like that.
Right.
And even prescription drugs, because I had been in some situations where they wanted to give me prescription drugs. No, I'm not going to get hooked on that. I've seen so many people do it. So no, they wanted to offer medications. What type, I can't tell you, but no, I'm not going to do that.
Tell me about sleep, because I know from when you email me, and that you're 3 hours different, that your sleep patterns are as abominable as typically my sleep patterns. So, any
Back then, yes. Again, because the assignments. I mean, if we literally got 4 hours, 5 hours sleep between assignments, we were lucky. And but I learned I could sleep, especially now. Of course, I'm not traveling right now. But for the past 6 years, been all over the place on a plane every other week. The minute we're taxiing, I'm sound asleep.
Good for you.
But it's still a short, if I can sleep 6 hours, that's about the max. Because it's like I have to get up, I have to do something. It's just that whole 42-year career, right? You've got to be ready to go.
Alcohol. In the movie, there seemed to be a struggle with that. Do you remember, it being an issue for you at any point in time? And did your drinking change over your career? What I find is that a lot of times my officers who used to drink socially and a lot of times overdrink socially, but is still in social settings, they're typically binge drinkers. They're not alcohol dependent. But holy shit, can they drink on a weekend? And then I found that there's at some point in time that drinking changed. It changed from being social drinking to isolated drinking, no longer drinking because they were happy and they wanted to have a good time, but something shifted and they were now self-medicating. And so like I said, so when I was watching the movie, and again, I understand it's a movie, alcohol seemed to play a role. And yet I still know that you drink. So I kind of wanted to touch base on that.
Well, and again, this year's with the Motorcycle Tax Squad, the hours, the fatal team and this and that. Yes, drinking. And even got to a point where we're got a little bottle of Jack Daniels in my saddlebag. We're way up in the mountains. It's snowing. It's cold. You're not supposed to be on a motorcycle up there, a little drink. But, and it started becoming an issue. And I started recognizing that issue right after I started Make-A-Wish, because now I'm more and more in the public. In the public, they want, oh, let me buy you a drink. Let me buy it's a fundraiser, whatever. I would have 2 drinks, and then I would switch to ginger ale, and that is my habit today. I will have 2 drinks in a function and switch to ginger ale. And I realized that when you're drinking, the binge drinking, which I did, as younger people do, I started losing control. And I never want to lose control. And that's why I stopped that binge drinking also. Now I will have maybe 1 or 2 beers, or I still love my Jack Daniels, a couple shots a week, and that's it. That's it. There's a refrigerator full of beer, and it'll last me a month or 2.
So people have asked me with cops, they said, how do you know when one of your guys has been drinking beer and otherwise they've been drinking Jack? And I explain it like this. When I get a call in the middle of the night and they've been drinking beer, they're normally crying over a relationship. When they're drinking Jack, they get on the phone and they start off with, "Hey, babe." And I know, game on with Jack. And it normally is going down a much more depressed, slippery slope. Jack my guys don't do well on the hard stuff.
Well, and also, Stephanie, I mentioned about my father, and he, in fact, became an alcoholic. That mad thing where in fact, Montgomery Ward sent him to so many clinics, him and his fellow executives, because they got into that drinking lunch type thing every day. And on his side of the family, his father, his brother, and his sister all died of alcoholism. So I was very aware of that, and that more and more. And I said, boy, I love the taste of this, the Jack Daniels, the beer. Wait a minute, my father, he couldn't control it. His sister, my uncles, they couldn't control it. My granddad. I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to help control.
Can I ask what your dad ended up dying from?
Alcohol. Well, he had a stroke, but his heart was so bad, the alcohol, it took him away. And he was only in his, like, 63.
Ooh, young.
Yeah.
Very young.
Yeah.
Very, very young. Had he gone on to remarry and have other children?
Yes. He married, now he didn't have other children. My stepmother, Eleanor, had a boy, Mark, my stepbrother, close relationship. But my stepmother became my mother. I adored that lady. She adored me. We had a very, very close relationship. I had another serious accident while on duty, a big brain injury and everything. Needed somebody to take care of me. I was single during this time. She flew up from Illinois and stayed with me and took care of me. We had that kind of relationship.
Was your mom ever jealous of that, or your mom was incapable of being jealous of anybody who is maternal?
I can't answer that because I didn't see my mother that often. I mean, my mother could have taken care of me. She's working, but still, she could have come over and helped out at night and that, but didn't. I never thought to ask her. She never offered.
Do you miss anything about your mom?
I miss that we didn't have the relationship. I've got that, one of my issues psychologically is the abandonment issue, living with that my whole life. And I just a shame that we didn't have that closeness. The closest that my stepmother and I had. It's a shame. And I still don't hold ill feelings against my mother whatsoever. But my wife, when she died 10 years ago, my wife said, "I've seen a change in you. It's like a relief." Because you never knew with my mother what she would be, like a bipolar. "Oh, honey, I'm so happy to see you. You son of a bitch, what are you doing here?" I mean, just boom. I never knew what to expect, especially with my second wife, Kitty, or my grandchildren. "Oh, you sweet little darlings," and the next minute she's yelling at them. So we never knew what to expect. And when she did die, like Kitty said, it was kind of like a relief on me.
Did you actually feel the relief, or not until after Kitty said something you realized that you did?
I didn't realize until after Kitty said it. It was maybe about a year later. We're still going through her affairs and trying to get everything settled and that.
Kitty seems to have come into your life at such a pivotal moment, and has been there through so much. She just seems like such a truly unique woman. Can you help me? If you had to introduce Kitty,
Yeah, and there's a 11-year age difference between us, and we had met. She was a secretary for the Highway Patrol, and when a district secretary, as they call it, and I had seen her. We just say hi and this and that because I'm on this squad that travels all over. And then when we had the whole 10-man team, they made her our traveling secretary. We have our whole 10-man team in an area where we're making massive arrests all the time. She's typing the reports. She's taking them to the courts. And we started paying a little bit more attention to each other. And then when that accident happened, and again, this is in a little area. They didn't have a hospital, just a small clinic. I was too injured to even fly by helicopter back down to Phoenix. And they said, Kitty, they put me back in a motel room, and I asked her to stay with me for a couple days and nights because I was going into shock, to keep me from going into shock. And following that's when we started kind of paying attention to each other. My other marriage had fallen apart, hers had fallen apart. So it just kind of clicked. And now, what, 36, 37 years later, and it's kind of funny now, people will interview her about that movie, about that scene, you know, going into shock, and say, well, how long have you been married? And she said, well, sometimes it feels like only about 10 years, sometimes about 50 years, and sometimes I would have wished that asshole would have gone into shock, let him go into shock. So, it depends, right?
Absolutely. You described when you were, all intents and purposes, dead. And yet you describe what many people have described, which is that you can still hear, that you're questioning, you know, why are they calling out, you know, the code that I assume it's code for officer down or officers gone or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
How did that impact you? What did that event, being able to literally die and be brought back?
Well, it for the first few months, it took about 6 months to recover from that injury. Again, massive brain injury, skull fracture, broken bones, missing skin. And for the listeners that don't know, a high-speed chase, 85 miles an hour on my motorcycle with a drunk driver in a 25-mile-an-hour zone through twists and curves and that. Another drunk driver pulled right in front of me, hit him broadside at 85. And I was told the crash was spectacular. But it wasn't until, I mean, a lot of nightmares and that, thinking about it, but it wasn't until I started talking to a counselor towards the end of that recovery period, to a psychologist. And he asked me, he said, do you remember going through the tunnel? Doc, I don't know what you're talking about, the tunnel. And he's explaining to me, a lot of people, and this is emergency room situation type things, you die, your life goes away. As your life is going away, it's like looking at the tunnel, all of a sudden the light goes out. And as you're brought back to life, the light starts opening up a little bit. And what did you see in the tunnel? And I'm going through this. I said, I remember seeing my little girls. They were laughing and giggling. They were jumping all over the place. And then they were gone. That's when the light was up. What do you remember when the light started coming back? He said, you remember any of your senses coming back? And he explained that when you die, you lose all your senses, obviously, and you're coming back, you start. I said, well, I remember the sense of hearing, just like you described. All of a sudden, I'm hearing sirens. She's brought them back. What are they talking about? It's 962A, officer injured, not dead anymore, 963A. The sense of touch, something is on my lips, something is tickling my face. The sense of smell, something very sweet, like a perfume. The sense of sight. I open my eyes and hear this beautiful blonde with a lip lock on me. and if this is heaven, okay, Doc, I'm fine with this. You know, to be a policeman, you got to have a little bit of humor. Now, what I also learned is my partner tried to revive me. The same thing with the CPR, the mouth to mouth. Big, ugly guy, big, ugly mustache, full of bugs.
Wasn't happening.
I mean, if I would have woke up to that, now that'd be traumatic. I mean,
That would have beaten your entire childhood right there.
oh yeah, that would just be so awful. But, and the biggest thing the counselor said before they released me for duty was, Frank, God spared you for a reason. Now, every police officer ever worked with Stephanie believes in a higher being, whatever religion it might be. You know, we all say a little prayer. We go to work every day. Please allow me to come home. You get home at night. Thank you for allowing me to come home. And it said, God spared you for a reason, and it's up to you to find that reason. And from 1978 to 1980 was a lot of rough years. That's when the marriage fell apart, the nightmares, everything else. And all of a sudden, 1980, I met this little boy who inspired me to start the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So I found my purpose. That's why God spared me.
When you talk about, you know, that the only thing a cop wants to do is, you know, go home, that I have reason why my tag has been the yellow brick road and stuff, is that my first patient I talk about was a 64-year-old man who was just the nastiest man I had ever met in my entire life. And long story short, he had been involved in, he was mandated, so he had to be there until he was 65. So it was going to be one hell of a year for me. And found out very early that he had been involved in a shooting in a bedroom community. undiagnosed PTSD at that point in time. It's now 24 years later into his career. Lots of the, the crisis stuff that goes on. The wife ended up leaving him, left him with the kids, comes back, takes the kids, just all the crap. And he was going to see, his friend was in the hospital. And I said to him, are we going to go see him? And he's like, nope. I'm like, why not? And he said, because I can't do anything for him. And I said, well, if he told you that he was scared, and he finished my sentence, he said, I would stand until I dropped. And then I realized that he was the wizard, that behind the curtain was just this gentle old man. And then I realized the only thing that a cop wanted to do at the end of the day was go home, Dorothy, most loyal canine, Toto. And that you guys never realized if you had the heart, the brains, the courage that was going to be asked of you in a day, and that somehow or another I ended up as Glinda. That is my job to watch over you guys. So hence how the Wizard of Oz was born. So when you talk about that, it certainly kind of ruminated. So I have this incredibly obnoxious amount of shit in my office from the Wizard of Oz, which I always forget because my back is towards it. So when my patients come in there, I always forget, and they're like looking, and probably think I have some affinity for flying monkeys or something. But
the counseling, if I can go on this just a minute.
Yeah, please.
My partner, my motorcycle partner, when I went to detectives, he decided he wanted to stay in the Highway Patrol Division. And friends for years, I mean, whatever situations, we were always there for each other. And he got killed in the line of duty. Drunk driver plowed in the back of the patrol car, exploded, and almost burned him to death. They called me, they took me to the hospital, and they said, you can't go to the emergency room. I did. He grabbed my hand. He called me Pancho all the time, my nickname. He'd stay with me, Pancho, and then he died. And I couldn't feel the emotion. I mean, I was just in shock. This couldn't happen to this man. And it wasn't until several years later, I just kept living with it. I could see the nightmares and everything. I finally went to a counselor. I said, I need to talk about this. Well, and my wife was with me. I said, I can't do this alone. I need you with me. And for an hour, we talked. And all of a sudden, my second time, and she said, it's the only second time I've ever seen you cry, I was on the floor. Again, just getting it all out. I mean, sobbing, just sobbing. And we finally got over that. And the counselor said something pretty neat to me. He said, I understand that you have badge numbers, that you're assigned a badge number, stays with your whole career. I said, well, yeah, doc. And he said, well, what's your partner's badge number? I said, 940. Why? He said, you know what? Just every now and then look at a clock, and you're going to see a digital clock at 9:40, and it's going to be Skip saying, hey, buddy, how you doing? Everything's okay up here. Now, both my wife and I, now this is 5 years ago I went to this counseling, but my wife, I never think about it. We never say, oh, it's almost 9:40. We'll just glance over the clock, and it's 9:40. Hey, Skip, how you doing?
I love that you talk about that, because I always talk about how there are no coincidences. That, if we say, oh, what a coincidence, it's 9:40, that we sometimes miss the only gifts that we can get.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about Chris, how this little boy, he didn't just change your life. The amount of lives that were changed. When you got asked to be part of, his day, what was going through your mind? You had kids of your own at that point. Your head didn't seem to be in a great place, at least, again, I'm going off of a movie, not knowing you. So if you could kind of give me what that was like.
Well, I was, like I said, I was on this command tech squad, worked the whole state of Arizona. And in our off time, years before, we would go to local grade schools and say, can we talk about bicycle safety with the kids? And the kids could care less. And this is during the period of CHIPS. The television show was so popular, California Highway Patrol Motorcycle Officer, Ponch and John. Demographics was 7 years old on up. The kids just loved this show. And in fact, we had trained initially with California Highway Patrol. We went to their motor school, and our uniforms were almost identical, except obviously ours said Arizona, but our equipment was identical to what the CHIPS were, the Highway Patrol rode there. So again, when we rode in these towns, the kids, hey, Chips, hey, Ponch, hey, John. And that's why we started going to the schools and working with these kids, what I love, because they were the same age as my daughters. So I had so much fun with them. So they could care less about bicycle safety. They just wanted to crawl over the motorcycles. Now, when I get this call from a dispatcher, and this is before the days of cell phones or anything like that, find the nearest payphone. I'm way up in the mountains in Arizona. It's 40 miles. I find a payphone. She calls and she says, we've just been informed about this little boy named Chris. In fact, the customs agent, Tom Austin, had befriended the family, and said, Chris's heroes are Ponch and John, and he told his mother, when I grow up, I want to be a motorcycle officer like Ponch and John. Except, unfortunately, Chris only had a couple of weeks to live. Terminal leukemia. Leukemia was a death sentence in 1980. There were no cures for it. Very few children ever survived. And they want to set up a special day for Chris, and with permission of his doctor and his mother, our state police helicopter is going to pick him up at his hospital, fly him to our headquarters in Phoenix, and we would like you to be there because of the fact you'd work with these children all over the state, so maybe you'd have a good relationship with this little boy. And I had no idea what to expect. I had like I said, never met this little boy. Helicopter lands. They timed it. It was so much fun stuff. They timed it so as the helicopter was approaching the landing zone, I'm driving in with my motorcycle. And all I see is this little face plastered against the helicopter glass. Big grin on his face. And I expected our paramedics to help him out when it landed. Helicopter lands, door opens, a little red pair of sneakers jumps out of there, runs over to the motorcycle. Hi, I'm Chris. Can I get on your motorcycle? Well, of course you can, Chris. Now, this little boy watched Chip so much, and again, our equipment is identical. That's a siren. Can I turn it on? These are the red lights. What's in your saddlebag? The same as Punch. He's laughing and giggling. And again, I couldn't fathom this because I learned later Chris knew he was going to die. He knew he only had a couple weeks to live, but he's having so much fun. I'm looking at his mother and she's crying. Why is she crying? Then it dawned on me, she has her 7-year-old back. He just came off IVs, but now he's having this greatest day of his life. And to kind of condense this story, in the next couple of days, Chris became the first and only honorary Highway Patrol motorcycle officer in the history of the patrol, complete with his own badge that's still signed to him today, a smoky hat, a custom uniform we had made for him, but more important, his motorcycle wings that made him a motorcycle officer.
Do you have any idea what you were doing, or in that moment, were you just doing what you thought was right?
Just doing what I thought was right. It was an assignment, but it was a very fun assignment. I mean, anytime you can work with the kids or something, make them giggle, laugh, whatever it might be. But it wasn't until a couple of days later that our director of the Department of Public Safety called me in. And when he calls you in his office, you think, okay, now what did I do, right? And he said, Frank, we've just lost a fellow police officer. And we've learned he's going to be buried in a little town called Kewanee, Illinois. And I would like you and your partner to go back there and give him a full police funeral. And he said, we can't cover your expenses. We can make an official admission, but we can't cover your expenses. In fact, you're going to have to take vacation time. Well, okay, boss, that's what you want me to do. But the department passed the hat to cover our airfares, to get our expenses. And not only that, but local TV station, a reporter that I used to work with all the time, donated money. And what's so funny, Stephanie, again, the days before internet or anything, we land in Chicago and we're met by the press. They find out what our mission is. On the way down to this little town of Kewanee, I borrowed my stepbrother's Jeep. He still lives in Chicago. In fact, that's the last time I saw my dad. We're talking about that. And we're driving in full uniform, our formal uniform, and get stopped by Illinois State Police. And he said, what are you guys doing in uniform driving this Jeep? Is this a scene out of Smokey and the Bandit or something? We're in But just started talking to him. And he said, you know, my partner quit a couple of years ago, joined Arizona Highway Patrol, wanted to be a motorcycle officer, to give me the name. And I said, small world, we just finished training him. Well, what he did was call his headquarters bill. He gave us an escort to the next officer, to his beat, then to the next beat to get us to little town. There's no GPS. We're trying to find on a map. And we were met by Illinois State Police, City Police, County Police, all wanting to help to give this little boy a full police funeral, which we did. And Stephanie, he was buried in uniform. His grave marker reads, Chris Gracious, Arizona Trooper.
You know, as you know, Gallo's humor is amazing with cops. Thank God, it's what keeps you guys around. But the one thing that you guys can never goof about is a child. Child's death is truly off limits.
Exactly.
So the empowerment becomes being able to do something. And it's a beautiful story, because I can imagine as they hear what you're doing, truly wanting to be able to embrace it because you want to feel like you can help, which is what, Make-A-Wish certainly, has done. I can't help but wonder whether or not you ever thought about the fact that Chris, that there's Ponch and John that obviously were there, and that of course your nickname is Poncho.
Yep.
That, if there are no coincidences, that you were supposed to be the one.
Well, like I said, God had a mission. He saved my life for some reason. So this was, and I still feel that today, this was the mission. This was the purpose he spared me.
I can see that. You had gotten emotional before, talking about Skip. What part of that is it the end? Is it what part of that loss for you, besides being an officer and a dear friend? But there was something that I saw in you that was quite moving, if you don't mind sharing.
Well, we all have these friends, the person that you can go to, the one that you can sit down and talk to, when you can light up a cigar and get a little bottle of Jack Daniels and just talk to, whatever it might be, problems at work, problems at marriage, problems just in life. And we had both got divorced at the same time. And with the Department of Public Safety Highway Patrol, you better pay your bills. You better not ever be notified that a bill collector is after you, because you're going to be terminated. And we're struggling. We're getting every type of side job we can. And we finally went to our commander, because we're having to pay child support, everything else going on, never missed a payment. But we're kind of broke, and we may be notified. We're trying everything we can, boss. And at that time, we had our temporary assignment called Sedona Oak Creek area. A beautiful part of Arizona. The motors work there, and we would usually be there for 2-3 weeks. They'd rotate us out, we'd come back again. And we got per diem during that time. And he said, you know what? I'm going to put you guys down there for the full summer, 5 months. We were assigned down there, so we're getting per diem. We're getting money. And we used all of that money to help pay the bills, because this is a lot of picnic grounds and everything. And our nickname during this time became Yogi Bear and Boo Boo, because we would drive through on our motorcycles through the picnic areas, which we were supposed to do, because sometimes they had a lot of stuff going on and what's supposed to go on. And the people that waved to us and we waved back, hey, come on over, you want to have lunch with us? So that saved the money right there. But just those type of things, that man was always there for me. I was always there for him, especially in backup situations. We were the to-go guys if somebody needed help.
Beautiful. He was divorced. Are you in touch with anybody that's still part of his family?
Yes, his ex-wife, yes. And she remarried another motorcycle officer, another friend who worked as detectives also. Like a lot of times they remarry in the cop world, because that's the only people who understand each other. And now he's retired. She retired from her job, just living the greatest life up in the mountains of Arizona, and stay in touch with them all the time. Beautiful.
We had talked about you being on eight different not-for-profit boards, so everybody's plucking at you. And from the fact that you are so incredibly responsive anytime anybody emails, texts, or what have you, and apparently can't say no. So of these boards, there are two of them in particular that you wanted to address today, that are obviously near and dear and kind of would resonate with the population that we're talking about. One of them was the Wounded Blue, that I am actually familiar with Randy Sutton. Yep. And the other is the U.S. Vets Prescott, Arizona chapter. So I wanted to let you talk about them.
Well, the Wounded Blue, you mentioned Randy Sutton, again, retired Las Vegas Metro lieutenant, in fact, the most decorated officer in the history of Las Vegas Metro. And unfortunately had a accident, had a stroke on duty and had to take a medical retirement, almost had his retirement time in. But we became friends. He contacted me 7, 8 years ago now, wanted to write a book with me in part of that book, and that's how we became friends. And then several years ago, he said, you know what, I want to start this foundation. I want you to be on the board member. Let's put this together. The Wounded Blue. And what we want to do nationwide, and we're talking PTSD, and we still see it like we talked about, Stephanie. You go to your supervisor, I need to talk to somebody. I can't do this anymore. I need to get the ghost out of my head. You know what, you're fired. If you can't handle it, we go. So we're developing kind of like Cop Line, where we've got now professional psychologists all over the nation that these officers can go to. All they have to do is make a call if they can't go personally, and nobody knows about it. It's between the officer and that psychologist.
And that's been, you know, for Cop Line, there have been times where we've needed to refer, where people don't have money or what have you, that they have been terminated or whatever, that we'll refer to Wounded Blue because we're just peers. So that our guys are retired, that have been trained to answer lines, but that's kind of the first line. But sometimes you need a licensed clinician that goes beyond. So it's really nice being able to work with all different organizations and being able to stay in one's lane, because there's so much stuff that needs to be done that still is not being done. The stigma still exists. Our suicide rates are high. We're going to continue, unfortunately, I think, with what's going on in society until that pendulum can shift back. I'm still seeing that rise in suicide, and the resources, I think, are greater right now, lowering the stigma and the fear of that termination. And though we've got, you know, large departments that are incredible when it comes to psych services, whether it's LAPD, the sheriff's department out there in California just seems to have an enriched kind of group, as well as kind of at the forefront of psych services. Go to the Midwest, not so much. As I talk about, you know, when we get calls, I mean, in Oklahoma, you can still be working at a 7-Eleven on Monday, on Tuesday have a gun badge and patch, be making $12 an hour, patrolling an area the size of Delaware alone, and have absolutely no representation, no union, that's no benefits. You know, what do you do? And then God forbid you get injured.
Exactly, and that's one of the other benefits we're offering them. Again, legal services, free. It's not costing them anything. Or just like you said, especially if you get injured in the line of duty. And
Right.
they don't want to put you on industrial. They don't want to pay you while you're injured. We're taking care of that. We're going after those chiefs and those mayors and those city councils big time. We're also getting into the service dog area, where we can provide service animals of these officers that in fact have had to retire. They've got these issues, that they've got that support, that therapy type dog with them.
So needed. I mean, it's really looking at the services that we don't have, not repeating services, but really looking at where are the plugs, because there are so many holes that need to be plugged. Is how do we plug them and not plug them with bullshit? Because, you know, so often, I mean, when we started Cop Line, I mean, our motto has always been, we were going to do it right, not fast. Because so often the road to hell is paved by good intentions, where people want to just throw stuff up because they have that idea, but you really need to be able to think it through, get, you know, the ducks in order. I don't think anybody has all ducks in order when they start off with anything. But to be able to stay in one's lane, keep the integrity of why you started something there, and not follow what I find to be the money trail of grants and what have you. I find that there's so many mission drifts when people lose sight of, well, this is why I did it. And then all of a sudden they find a grant and like, well, I can bend it a little bit to kind of fit that so I can get, it's like, no. That's just it. That's the devil. Like, you can't go with the devil. You got to stay. And it's really hard. And that's where, you know,
and one of the good things about Randy Sutton, he's not politically correct whatsoever.
Oh, I met Randy.
And Randy is also a continuous Fox News contributor.
Yeah.
So he gets on there, he tells them what, because people aren't aware of this
Yeah.
whatsoever. What do you mean what? What do you mean he got injured and you're not going to take care of him?
Yeah.
So he's getting that message out there.
No, he is a great voice. And it's not even about political correctness. It's about reality. And people just like nice, neat packages. Well, there's nothing in law enforcement that is a nice, neat package. Nothing.
Right.
So, and tell me about the other not-for-profit, the U.S. Vets of Prescott.
Yeah, U.S. Vets is not associated with the Veterans Administration. This is a separate nonprofit. They are, in fact, nationwide. I'm on the board for the Prescott chapter. And our mission of U.S. Vets, because I'm obviously a veteran, is we find the homeless veterans. And in our area, we got the woods, we got everything. These guys are scattered all over. We find them, we get them, bring them in and get the temporary housing if they want to come in. That's the biggest thing, trying to encourage them to come in, as they say. Get them into temporary housing. Then we get them into counseling. We get them to people like you. Why are you out there? Why do you want to do this? We get them into job training, job placement, and then permanent housing. We've established a big complex with over 100 units that these veterans can live. They're permanent housing for them. And then also, which is kind of fun, we have also a big VA hospital here. Back in the Indian War days, the Cavalry War, it was called Fort Whipple. It still is called Fort Whipple, now part of a VA hospital. But the old officer headquarters, the old officer row with their homes and everything else, our board just convinced Congress to donate those to us, to U.S. Vets chapter.
Beautiful.
And they are now, in fact, being remodeled into separate apartments. These are big, huge 2-3 story places. And how much fun these guys are looking forward to that. Maybe a sergeant or a private is now going to be living in officer quarters. So
Exactly.
it's kind of fun, that kind of mental thing.
And you know, psychologically, one of the, I don't know if you've been to in Los Angeles over by Westwood, that they have a very large VA. I was driving there a few weeks ago, and they have all these tents for veterans that are set up that you know are selectively homeless, but all the tents have American flags on them. Many of them are actually on the VA property, so it gives them kind of safe passage in some ways to be. That it just kind of hit me on a very different level of, you know, my projection is everybody needs a house, everybody needs, you know, whatever, is looking at this and really realizing that they're figuring it out on some level. And being able to turn a place, a fort that had been used, an active military location, that's home for them.
Yes, that's their comfort zone, as we say, right?
You know, you can give them $1 million house, they're going to live, you know, in a closet, because that is where they're most comfortable. It's really understanding somebody's needs, not your needs projected onto somebody, but somebody's needs, and being able to hear them. So that's incredible.
Yeah, and these guys, they have to take care of everything. You go to this campus we have now, and it's like a military installation. There's not a blade of grass that's overgrown. There's no trash. There's no nothing, because they're taking pride in what they're doing, where they're living.
And you had talked about earlier in the show about control. And what we know about anybody typically that goes into law enforcement is the importance of control, or perceived control, because when something is out of control is when you can die. And military is no different. And being able to have that sense of control, of being able to decide where I'm going to live, how I'm going to eat, those blades of grass, that comfort level is in a regiment. When we look at, we talked about, cops and convicts. Well, convicts get out of jail all the time due to good behavior. Well, when you remove somebody's choices of what they're going to do, they do very well when somebody else has control. And when you're in the military, there's set schedules. Everything's kind of done. There is pride. There is a certain way that buildings are kept, that grounds are kept, that meals are done that's very comfortable. So being able to do that now, when one is a vet rather than active, I would think would be just beautiful and comforting for them to be able to function in that type of environment.
Yeah, it brings that whole pride back. I mean, you can see it. You can see that gradual thing. A quick story, if I have time. You mentioned LA, and I have a friend over has a shop down in the district. I guess they call it the entertainment district or something down there by Staples Center and so on.
Mhm.
And he has a veteran, a Marine veteran, that comes in there every now and then. Hey, can I have some type of job? And he has them wash windows in this big place. He has a sweep, mop everything, gives them some money, and they become somewhat friends. Now, this guy is involved with the Marine Toys for Tots, this vendor, every year. And he came up and he found out, and he said, I'd like you to help. I'd like you to be part of this. And he found out he was a gunny sergeant. He got his records, and this guy's full of medals, everything else. No, I don't want to be involved with the people. He just kept refusing. I was getting ready for this. He got the uniform. He got all of the salad, as we call, on everything. The sergeant comes in, Gunny, I want you to help. And he held up this uniform. You could see, I'm just describing this. I mean, I get emotionally just thinking about it. He said, you could see this guy kind of humped over, and then all of a sudden standing up, and now he's tall. He's standing tall. Yes, sir, what do you want me to do? He saw the uniform, he saw that pride, he's recognized everything that he had been through and done. You don't get those medals for nothing. Combat veteran.
Beautiful. I mean, there's making a difference. That's really what it is. It's about resiliency. It's about surviving. It's about taking all of one's experiences and making a difference. What is it that you would want to tell law enforcement? The men and women today that are questioning why they're doing this. We're getting calls on Cop Line that are heartbreaking. Heartbreaking, having to do with dealing with society. As I say, I've been interviewed quite a bit about COVID and, have we seen an uptick in calls or what have you? And I said, here's the truth. The truth is that cops always were prepared to deal with the invisible enemy. They have since the first day they ever got on this job, pre-COVID, pre-everything.
Right.
What they were never prepared for was to become the enemy.
Exactly, the war on cops. And I saw the war on cops start just before I retired with the former presidential administration. That's when the war on cops started and continues. And I wasn't in that, especially the uniform environment. I'm back in the 70s, 80s, and in the uniform thing, where the respect for police were there. Perfect example is I'm a highway patrolman. I stop somebody, they start giving me all sorts of guff, everything. And all of a sudden they stop. I'm sorry, I thought you were a city policeman. That type of thing. I'm sorry, because they knew we weren't going to take that crap to them. And we were taught, and what it gets me is you can see on TV, and it's different again today, we've had that comfort zone. If you get inside my 3-foot space, you're mine. And now you see them, they can't do anything. They're right up against their face, threatening, spitting, and everything else, and they can't do anything. If you raise your fist at me, I couldn't do anything, but I said, if you're going to hit me, you are not going to believe what happens next. We were taught that. And if they did hit you, you use the force necessary to stop it.
My guess is that you had support from your leaders. That
and in the training also, that's where we were trained. We didn't have, even then, the mace. We didn't have the stun guns. We had the side handle baton. And that was it. That was but the biggest thing we were taught was boxing, but not only boxing, street fighting. And I see that in so many things, and I don't know if they're teaching street fighting. You can be the best boxer in the world. You can be the most muscle guy in the gym, but if you're not a street fighter, the little guy's going to take you down. And I don't know if they're teaching that today.
I think the lack of leadership from above, the lack of support,
100%.
Yeah. And so what do you say to the men and women out there? if you could do a public service announcement that would address every one of them, what would you tell them?
Wow, that is so hard, Stephanie. Again, I'm a has-been.
With a voice, with a hell of a voice and a hell of a track record. So
it's just go out there and try and do your job. Do the job the best you can. And try and get a voice, even the small departments. Arizona's a right to work state. We don't have a union per se, but we do have our associations. You get a command, you know, I don't really agree with this command. Well, it's like the military. You got to carry out that command. But then go to those unions if you can. Try and get those type things, those support groups, and say, you know what, we got to change this. I personally filed, I think in my career, about 5 class action suits against my department for things that I could see, because I had former management, so I knew how to handle these things. And these leaders would make some of the most ridiculous decisions. It's going to hurt people. File a class action suit. I wasn't the most popular person in my career, but you know what? They didn't mess with me because I won every one of those, and I actually earned respect of upper management.
when Make-A-Wish became as well known as it is, what was the noise around your department?
And I respect this gentleman, the Ralph Milstead was director of the Department of Public Safety at the time. I told you when he called me in my office, said I'd like you to go back. And we started the foundation. I'm the first president, CEO. I'm trying to do both. I'm trying to run this foundation. I'm trying to work. I'm the guy on my squad that was always high in the felony, DUIs, etc. And the director called me in. And again, okay, what did I do now? He said, Frank, I know what you're doing. I'm going to support you 100%. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give you an office for you to use. And again, this is before computers or anything. I'm going to give you typewriters, copy machines, a Watts line. People knows what that is. And he said, but the biggest thing I want from you is you are going to give me 8 hours of work. But if it takes you 15 hours to do that, you are going to give me 8 hours of work. And yes, boss, I will. And I respected the heck out of that. And it usually would take 15 hours. I do my morning shift type thing. I go in there for several hours, then I go back out. My guys that I'm supposed to work with, why are you still out here? What are you doing? Well, I got a promise to my boss. So he respected me, but I respected him. Again, like I learned as a youth, you know, he's helping me out, give everything I can to honor that. What
is the one or the most important thing that you've learned thus far in your lifetime?
Humility.
Learned it throughout your lifetime. Have you ever not been humble and you've been bitten in the ass?
Oh, well, who hasn't? And it's featured in the movie, didn't you? Yeah, and I like to say life is not all puppies and lollipops and everything. We all have hiccups in our life. It could be daily, weekly, whatever it might be, something minor, something major. But again, it taught as a little boy is how you handle those hiccups. You know, you can stress out, oh my, but find a way to change whatever that hiccup is to make that thing a positive action.
Absolutely. Is there anything that I haven't asked you, anything that you want our viewers to know that I haven't covered?
Watch Wishman, but you've covered that. Read the book, wait a minute here. Oh, okay, you hold that up, I'll hold that up.
Absolutely.
You know what's fun about the movie, Stephanie, is a low-budget independent film. And I was approached about 6 years ago I was speaking at a group. In fact, we were filming a documentary for another gentleman called Stickability. And it was kind of a set audience. And afterwards, I got this big ovation. I did my part. And the host came up and said, that wasn't part of the script, what's your wish? I said, what do you mean? It's not about me, it's about the kids. I don't have wishes. No, if you had something, if you need a new round pen, a new pickup, horse trailer, what you need. And I said, I just like to have my story told. And not thinking about a movie because I was already starting to write the book. And that was about it, looking back for a publisher. And then the director came up to me afterwards and said, I've never seen a reaction like I've seen with the audience with your story. And I want to do a movie about your life. And I thought they were talking about a documentary. But I said, no, I'm not interested. He said, yes, you are. We're going to do it. And that's how that started the whole thing on that. But what I'm getting at, this low budget independent movie, last year, I don't know if people know, we qualified for Academy Award for Best Picture. I mean, we knew we weren't going to win that, but to be with the big boys, the multi-million-dollar films, the big stars and everything, and what a testament to that cast and crew, how much love and effort they put into that movie.
It's a testament to what you've done. It's a testament to human resiliency, love for human beings, about being able to truly make a difference with no ulterior motives, just pure love for another. And the movie, there are a few movies in my life that have impacted me the way that Wishman did. And no, truly, I'm relatively callous at this point in time. I've spent too many years with you guys. Yet there are certain types of films that would just take me down. Yours took me down. And it really is, there are times when, I'm sure like you go on in a career and you think to yourself, I can't do this for one more day. There's not one more body I can scrape up off of the highway. There's not one more problem I can listen to, one more person that is pecking at my soul to help them. And then something happens and you just realize that it's where you're supposed to be. And when I watched Wishman, I knew I was supposed to see the movie. I knew truly I was supposed to do something with the movie. And one of the things that I have asked everybody who has seen it, that still is in training or whatever, is to figure out how to get it into police academies. Because I am tired of listening to society talk about what shits law enforcement are. To understand that one man cared enough for another human being and was able to change what is truly millions of lives, because it's not just the people whose wishes that you fulfilled. It's Chris's mom that could watch her son jump out of that car and go over to that motorcycle or the helicopter, and to watch her dying 7-year-old be a 7-year-old, and not for that moment look at him as a dying 7-year-old. That's what that movie is about. That's what life is about. We can't stop death. None of us. People used to say death and taxes. Oh no, there are plenty of people that are evading taxes.
Uh-huh.
But death, you ain't cheating death. So how do you deal with it? How do you deal with it knowing that it has to occur? And how can you make it as peaceful and as fulfilling on the way out as it was when you came into the world?
Well, so I'm laughing a little bit because last week I did a interview for a documentary for Netflix called The Exit Interview. And the producer that called me out of LA said, I'd like to have you part of this documentary. I said, well, what's the exit interview? He says, it's about people who are going to die. I said, you know something that I don't know what's going on? And just what you my age, health issues, COVID, whatever it might be. What do you think about that? What do you feel? What's going to happen? What do you want to leave behind in that? So, and just what you're saying. But let's hope we leave a good image on the world when we leave.
I always said, if I could leave this world a little bit better than when I came in, then I have fulfilled my life. And with my kids, when we go to a hotel or whatever, I always say, find the one thing in the hotel room that you can leave a little bit better, something that needs to be squared up or what have you. There's always something that you can leave the world a little bit better without having asked anything in return.
And remember, it doesn't take money. All it does is if somebody needs help, try and help them out. Give your time if you can.
Absolutely. And thank you. Thank you for the time that you have given me. Thank you for the time that you have given the world. Thank you for doing a dual career that I was not capable of doing. and that so many of us watch, admire, appreciate, that will never be lost, truly, from generation to generation. And thank you for the dying, and thank you for the living, for being able to have figured out how to make this world a better place for all of us.
Well, Stephanie, thank you. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed talking to you. And as we say in the cowboy world, so long.
Thank you. And for everybody again, please, if there's one movie you watch, one movie in your lifetime, not this year, it's Wishman. And to please go ahead, order the book on wishman1.com. And that Frank himself said that he's going to be autographing them. So even more special. And next week, again, please follow me on Steph Therapy 911. We're going to continue to leave the world a little bit better of a place on a weekly basis.